speaking of kind of the theme that has been going on for the whole year, in this circle, I think we've heard a little bit from different presenters over the year, and I'm going to be focusing on number 2, kind of thinking about the overall approach. But I'm not going to assume that anybody is ready for that just now. So I'm going to be mostly talking about how to write an aim statement. But I'm not thinking about this necessarily for like a research project per se, but just any project. So we think about aims in terms of, you know, different ways. They can be objectives, they can be goals, they can be really narrow, they can be really broad. And I want to have you guys think about writing up some aims that are not only aligned with kind of your vision and passion, but also kind of signaling to the reader the tenor and sort of the flavor of this. And this idea, and I'm going to share with you all that there's multiple ways to write aims. And so we're going to practice those and see what those differences look like. We're also then, after we do that, so that'll be interactive, and that's where I'm going to ask you guys to just take any project idea. It could be remodeling your bathroom. I mean, it doesn't have to be about research right now, but the same idea that anytime you're going to take on a project, if you don't do some of this upfront thinking about kind of what it is you want to do and where it is you want to go, then you find yourself often kind of at the end of it, and then you didn't maybe get the data that you needed necessarily, or you might have to go back to fill in some blanks that you might have missed. So we're really trying to help you kind of think things through from start to finish, so that when you get started, you've at least thought it through once. And then just sort of talk about how you might write that up into a plan and how to think about timelines. So that's my goal. You guys can stop me at any time to ask questions if what I'm presenting isn't clear. But the first thing I want you guys to do and use in the chat is like when you think about doing some kind of a scholarship project. So the theme all quarter has been, you know, aligning your scholarship activities with your passions and having that set of choices when projects come to you or when you're thinking about projects. We heard, I think, from Paul and Tyler that if you can see how this project idea sort of fits into your global idea of what you think is what you are about as a scholar, then you kind of have a way when people come to you and say, hey, Tiffany, you know, I've got this new project and I need some help. Are you the right person? You know, I was thinking this might be up your alley. Let's talk. And if you've never figured out what your alley is, then you're going to have a hard time knowing whether that statement is true or not. And so I think for a lot of junior faculty and senior faculty, it's sort of all of us, if you don't exactly know what your path is, then you can take the advice that says, say yes to everything because you want to make collaborations everywhere and you want to take advantage of whatever opportunity comes your way. I did that as a junior faculty member, and at one point I had 12 different projects going on and none of them had anything to do with the other ones. So as you can imagine, I was spread all over the place, and I had to start, as those came to a close, think when the next set of people come toward me, how do I know what my own North Star is to say if what they're offering aligns with who I am and what I'm on about? So as you were thinking about doing scholarship, I'm just wondering if you can take a minute and just put in the chat, you know, kind of what's in it for you. Like, why would you even say, sure, I'd love to have coffee with you and tell me more about that idea? Or, you know, what is it about the scholarship activity that because we get something in it, what's in it for you, I guess is my question. You can either unmute or type in the chat. And it can be anything. I like my friends. I need to do it for work. You know, whatever your ideas are, it's fine. What's in it for you to do scholarship? Satisfaction doing scholarly work well. Yeah, learn how to get published, right? Fulfillment. So there's a lot of reasons why we do this, and these are all of Shom's reasons that he and I have brainstormed together. Actually, we share these. You know, we do it because we love it. We do it to be a good colleague. If someone reaches out to us and say, hey, Tiffany, I really need your help on this, you know, that's saying they see something in you and you may need their help someday. So, you know, doing a favor, I think what we heard from Addie and Tyro was they've kind of advanced their scholarship together by helping each other out. And their friendship got deeper, their scholarship got better, and it made them feel really good about being a member of their teams. You can acquire new skills like learning how to get published. Maybe you're one of those lifelong learning people and you just like to keep the steep edge steep. And so you're always learning something and staying on the cutting edge. It's in theory part of our job. It's why we choose academic medicine over other kinds, is to do scholarship and to be a part of a scholarly community. And then sometimes, you know, you'll say yes to a project because you just have to, right? It's for the greater good, but that then can potentially open doors to new things that you didn't even know that you loved. So these are all reasons why people do it. And this is actually a project outline. So if you've ever seen those little small grants projects that come out of CLIMB, which is the Center for Learning and Innovation in Medical Education. Did I get that right, Sean?
Leadership and innovation.
Leadership, close. And they ask for all these categories because this is like the elevator speech of any kind of a project. And it's, even if you don't ever have to turn one into anybody, answering all of these questions will mean that you've actually thought through the whole cycle and you're forecasting a little bit ahead to see if this is the right question, if you have the right resources, if you have the right teammates or collaborations. And then, you know, when you're planning to take something on, it takes the same amount of time or perhaps even more to work on a project that hasn't been thought through and isn't 100% clear as it does to do one that is. So when you are really crystal clear about your objectives and what you're trying to do, that is also important because whatever you say in your aims is hinting at methods. And if someone like me who is familiar with those methods sees that you have an aim and then a set of methods and they don't align, that isn't going to communicate that you know what you're doing. And so, you know, much like if you were in a clinical situation and you had a DNR order, and then someone comes in and they start to intubate somebody, that might be part of the order, that might not be part of the order, but there starts to be an incongruence there. And you're like, as soon as there's an incongruence, then either you're introducing confusion, but you also may be undermining your credibility. So part of the number one test for a good proposal is it coherent from start to finish? Does the set of ideas keep reinforcing what I've already learned so far? And does it seem like the whole project is going in the same direction and is likely to achieve the desired objectives that have been stated? So this is something that basically my mentor taught me, is that a good proposal and helpful scholarship organization is when each step that you think through kind of amplifies and reiterates what you've already said before. And so it's a little bit like a musical score where you keep adding notes, but the tune is still the same. So for me, I think a lot about aims and their audience. And the reason that I say this is because the kinds of questions that you ask are a reflection, I think, of two things. The first is sort of, what is the state of the science? And are we actually at a hypothesis testing stage? So many times the work that we're doing is we're not there yet. So a lot of the surveys that I've been helping people create as their academic research coach have been fairly descriptive in nature. Tell me about your experience when you did this. Or they may be that they're sort of baby hypotheses, like I hypothesize that people will have higher satisfaction after the end of this educational intervention. But they could also be descriptive to just say, here's what people took away from this. And it may not be that I'm hypothesizing anything, but I'm staying in the land of sort of rich description, so that, for example, if it's a QI project, I will value really unpacking what happened in the black box of some kind of a clinical process, so that I can understand what to intervene on and what I might change. And so that may not be hypothesis testing. And that's perfectly fine, because not all questions are ready for that kind of intervention. So there are 5 different ways, and these I've learned by doing workshops teaching how to write grants with other people. So these are not coming only from me, but from people at different levels of organizations, from clinical QI to writing grants for the National Institutes of Health, and everything kind of in between. And the reason is that, as I said before, once you start with your aims, which is usually the thing that comes first, then you're setting expectations of what to follow. And these can be the different ways in which you frame that. So you could just write a research question because you're curious about something. Kim McDonald and Caroline Killer are going to do a survey about how the onboarding process goes. So their research question could be, how does the onboarding process work for new hires? It could be simple, something simple like that. It could be hypothesis testing about a hunch that they have that they want to try to prove. It could be, we are going to redesign an onboarding process. So it could be descriptive, but talking about kind of what it is we're going to do. Or it could focus on, we're going to design an onboarding process because we want to increase our new hires' capacity to perform their job and get used to our environment in a short period of time, so they can be working at their full capacity as soon as possible. And that's kind of focusing on the end point. Or we could say we want to design a new onboarding process because we want to be the best place to draw new hospitalists. And we want people to know that the way they start here is the highest quality in the nation. And the reason that I kind of frame them in that way is because it sort of depends on who your audience is. So if the CEO of UW Medicine, our dean, wants us to be the best place for hospitalists, then I might start with that high aspirational goal, because I'm communicating something that is in alignment with our dean and our dean's aspirations, that we be number one as, you know, the destination place for all hospitalists in the country. But if I'm not working with the dean and the dean is not my audience, then maybe that's the wrong goal. Let's say instead that my audience is our quality improvement and implementation teams, then I really want to focus on sort of the actions and maybe the products a little bit, and really hone in on what's it going to take for us to improve our process. And so I might shift how I write that. If your audience, let's say you were in the research scientist track, and or you were in the clinician scholar track, where creating new evidence is actually both part of your passion and also part of your expectation, then you may be more kind of in that traditional track of writing research questions or drafting hypotheses, because your goal is primarily to contribute to the new knowledge base and not necessarily create actionable items that you would use tomorrow in a QI process. So let me give you a couple of examples. We took Susan Merrill's study, and I don't know if those of you may know this study. She had this idea that if you want to align with patients, and we come in as clinicians and we are always standing up and hovering over the patients, which changes the power dynamic, because they're in a bed and we're standing over them. And the idea is, what if we just got a chair and we sat down? And so we were at eye level when we had patient interactions. And she did that as a study. And the study turned out to have a lot of different effects, but these are 5 different ways that we could have asked that question. So as a research question without a particular endpoint. So the difference, I think, between an open-ended research question and a hypothesis is that a research question, you don't actually know what the answer is yet. And part of the reason why you're asking the question is to even be able to describe what possible outcomes might be that you could then hypothesize about in another way. So for example, a research question is, what is the effect of putting chairs in the room to promote communication? Which doesn't tell us that we know what direction that's going. But to reframe that as a hypothesis, we would say, when physicians are seated, patient satisfactions with communication ratings will be higher. So I've described kind of the causal effect and the outcome here, and also the direction of the outcome. And so you can see that's, or maybe you can't, but I'm hoping you can see that that's actually queuing me up to be thinking about different kinds of things, because it's not open-ended at all. I'm actually making a prediction, and the design of my study should follow that I could test that hypothesis. An action would be just simply to say, we will put chairs in patient rooms and measure patient satisfaction with communication ratings before and after. So it's not telling us what the answers might look like, but it's telling the reader, oh, that's what you're going to do. Oh, that's what this project is about. Okay. A product would be, adding chairs is a good investment to improve communication with no added time or cost, or that could say with low cost. And that would be sort of building on the assumption that this works. So you could, this might be after you've done your hypothesis or your descriptive study. And now you're doing a name to show how this is a good investment. So if you were going to demonstrate something, you'd be showing that this is like a return on investment for making this low cost purchase has long-term rewards. And then lastly, as a goal or aspiration would be, we're going to increase patient satisfaction scores without additional time or cost burden. And that doesn't really tell me anything about anything, except that that's what we're going to do. And at the end of the day, our goal would be to increase the patient satisfaction scores with very little investment, relatively speaking, for what it would otherwise take to make those scores move in an important way. So I'm going to pause there and see if people have questions. Because it's your turn to play. So when I look at how Shom and I have a disagreement about the order of these things, the way that it's been marketed thus far is sort of problem purpose audience. So you define the problem first, and then you decide, you know, what the objective is and then who it's going to be for. And I'm the other way around, because I pretty much feel like if you aren't clear on kind of ultimately who your audience is, you'll make different design choices, because I believe that who cares about your research is going to influence the purpose of that research, as I hope I've just demonstrated, and therefore what kind of product your audience is going to care about. And then the last question, which is a new one that I added for the purposes of this, because we've been talking about passion, is at the end of the day, when you're done with all of this, how does it actually advance your cause? You know, how does it contribute to your set of reasons for why you do this? So I want you guys to type on a computer or take out a piece of paper. And I want you guys to just take about 2 minutes and pick any project that you're noodling on. And if you don't have a scholarship project, you know, think about something in your life that you're trying to accomplish. You don't have to share the details, but I want you to try the writing exercise. And before we write the aim, I want you to answer these questions. Who are you trying to reach with this project? So who besides you cares? what do you want or need your project to do? What would you hope to have at the end? And how would that fit in your passion? So the reason that I start with this is that sometimes we go straight to writing aims without having answered these questions first, or they may be more floating around, but not actually concrete and specific for you. And so this first step of just answering these 4 questions then helps you with the next set. So looking at what you've written so far, and remembering that the research questions and hypotheses are really for people who are data oriented and really love to see the results of your data and your analyses, or maybe the QI leadership folks who are thinking about actions and projects and maybe goals. So looking at your audience member, think about who will want what kind of results from you. And so see if you can write yourself an aim, 1 or 2 if you have more than 1, based on the free write that you just started. So you articulated the beginnings of a project idea. Which of these different ways of writing it is the best match with what you're thinking about? And then just try to write an aim statement. Cassidy, go for it.
Oh, sorry, thanks. So just to clarify, like we might only pick one of the colored boxes to write our aim statement. Is that correct?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, you really should be only picking one.
Okay.
Sometimes what people will do is they will write either a research question or maybe an action. And then if they have hypotheses, they'll write those underneath. So a hypothesis might be a subset of a different kind of question. But if you have a hypothesis and that's really what your aim is, then write your research, then write it as a hypothesis.
Great, that's very helpful.
I'm going to go back and show Susan's examples just so you have something to look at for the difference. So give it a try. I'll give you 3 minutes. So I think that's most of you. If you're still writing, that's okay. You can catch up later. So does anybody, that's okay. Before we go on, does anybody have one they want to either write in the chat or speak out loud? And then if you read it, we'll try and figure out what kind it is. Do I have any volunteers?
I can do mine. Keeping in mind, because I'm nursing my baby and I'm on maternity leave, I wrote it down in my head. That's and fine. It's more focused on a home project than a scholarly project.
Also fine.
But it is a big project. So essentially, I'm hoping to create a space in the downstairs office that serves as an office for both my husband and I, and a space to create art in a way that is visually pleasing but cost effective and allows me to separate my home life from my work life in the coming months, as I will be working from home as a fellow quite a bit for the next year.
What do you like about that? Which part resonates with you?
Me?
Mm-hmm.
I like that. I think the piece that is big for me is keeping it cost effective and visually pleasing / organized. So I'm trying to, form and function, create a place that I want to be working. But I also, I'm still early in my career and don't want to just, spend the moon on it. So I'm trying to be really thoughtful and put in a lot of do-it-yourself stuff. But so it's kind of that balance that's appealing to me, that makes me passionate about it.
So team, what looking at this list, what kind of goal or aim statement do we think this is?
Seems like goals, aspirations.
right? Or maybe product. So there were a couple of keywords there. Yeah, exactly. Product with a touch of goals. I think I agree with that in the sense that there was a couple keywords in there and we aren't reading it. So we're going to all have to remember what you said. But the first thing that you opened with, and you said, I'm hoping, which I'm going to tell you in an aim statement, you never write that down.
Okay, that's good to know.
Because if you're hoping, that means you don't have any confidence it's going to actually happen. So this is the first fake it till you make it strategy, is that you keep your hopes to yourself and you make strong claims about what you're going to do, period, end of story. So yours aim starts at to create. And that suggests to me that you're going to build something. And if I were to restate your long aim, which you'll have to work on trimming down, because if you can't say it in one breath, it's too long. So that's also a good, if you need that much air to read through your entire statement because it's on and on and on, and there's a lot of details here, then nobody else is going to remember it either, and you're going to run out of air before you finish saying the story. So
that makes sense.
It's an important thing for all of us, is short and pithy, because people's attention spans are getting shorter with time, not longer. So what I heard you say was to create a functional space for you and your partner that is aesthetically pleasing and cost effective to build.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that's something that all, like, you already got Tiffany saying, awesome, that sounds great, right? So you've already got us like all excited for you that this is a project we want for you as well. So you've created some buzz and some enthusiasm. We're all really wanting to know, now that you've come up, we can see what your art looks like. So now you're giving us a little bit of, like, this would be a figure in your thing. You're going to show us, this is kind of what I'm aiming for. This is the kind of art I'm looking for. This is I want windows. I need this color, right? You're painting a picture of where it is that you want to go. And in one sentence, you've sold us and we're already on board. So we're excited. Now we really want to make it happen for you too, right?
Cool.
Anybody
no,
else?
those are good tips.
Anybody else want to try one? This is your chance to workshop a name statement. This is free advice. I highly recommend you try it.
I can do one. So this was just what I was emailing about before this FCP. So mine was to have a monthly medicine consult journal club to enhance faculty perioperative knowledge, and to have a product of peer-to-peer evaluations for faculty promotions.
So just read the first part to me without the second part. Now we know what the second part is, so let's just read the first part again.
It was to have a monthly medicine consult journal club to enhance perioperative knowledge.
Awesome. Okay, team. What kind of style is that? Tiffany, what kind
Would
of
it be the actions?
Mm-hmm. Actions or products, right? So you have, and it's okay, right? They're not always going to be 100%, but then it's like, okay, so when I'm listening for what comes next, am I listening that I'm hearing that the intervention is the journal club, and the outcome is increased knowledge about perioperative, whatever that thing was at the end. So it's some of both, and it would depend then if the rest of what you were going to talk about is getting the journal club up and running, in which case it's probably going to be more about the action, or if that's just sort of like, or, you know, that's going to be the short piece, but what you're really interested in is learning about how knowledge changes. So you're pointing me to kind of look at potentially two different things, because you've signaled you've got an intervention and an outcome. And you haven't yet, but you might in the next phrase, about the product, sort of, then you're leading me towards, oh, I see where the action is here in terms of which of those two things. Are you mostly focused on the process or the outcome? And those are not mutually exclusive, but sort of what you would say next would sort of get me thinking, oh, I see where she's going here. I already know that you're going to do a journal club. I get that. And you've told me what you're going to talk about. And so in your short aim, you've already communicated a lot of information about your intervention. And so that may be all you need to tell me, because journal clubs are common and we understand what those are, and you don't need to write a book about it. But what you might talk about is, you know, some details about how you're going to organize that, but then the rest of your proposal might be, how are you going to measure that?
Yeah.
So if that's true, then you can think about, you know, do you want to go more researchy and back it up a little bit to see if you might want to think about a hypothesis or a more data-driven kind of question. And I'm not to say that any one of these is the right answer, because the right answer depends on what you're trying to accomplish. Can we have one more? Bill, to share lessons learned from a 10-year experience in developing an interprofessional collaborative primary care teaching clinic. Okay, what kind is that? Yep, I think you're right. I think it's more a product even than a goal. Because if it was a goal, it would be almost thinking policy level. So your objective wouldn't be to share those lessons, but your objective would be to make policy recommendations based on lessons learned from. Or it might be to demonstrate how School of Medicine's investment in interprofessional collaborative primary care teaching has produced better physicians or something like that. So you're on that goal and aspiration when is kind of when, the way I like to think about those is, I'm selling this to leadership to show them that the things on the H chart or whatever their organizational chart or their strategic plan, that my work is demonstrating how their aspirations in that strategic plan has actually come to pass. And that we have actually either we are in alignment about the policy goal and I'm on my way there, or I'm at the end and I can demonstrate that your policy intuitions were correct and I have evidence to support that. So I think the product is more descriptive of actually what you ended up with, and the goals and aspirations is more vision level or alignment with vision, if that makes sense. Okay, awesome. Now I want you to change it to a policy regulatory goal if you want to. You can try. So it never hurts, even if your goal is not to do hypothesis testing, it never hurts to write a hypothesis, because it does two things for you. It puts down on paper what you think your hunches are about what the mechanisms are, and that can be actually super helpful, especially in design. So if you think, for example, that all the action is on having people go through a program because that's where they're going to get the skills they need to be the kind of person that you want them to be able to further the mission, then you have a hypothesis about the mode of action. And so you can, sometimes it's important to write that out just so that you're even aware of what your own hunches are about how things work. Part of that is also then helpful because you can ask other people if that's how things work, right? So you can get other people to help support your idea, but it also points you in a direction of outcome testing and sort of, some people can just build stuff and never evaluate it, but I think those of us who are going to go to our institution and ask for significant resources, the institution is fair to ask us back, well, what are you going to do for that investment? And sometimes writing a hypothesis for the same question, even if that's not the one you're going to act on, can help you think through kind of what else needs to happen to get you to that product. So that was a perfect lead in to the next part, which is, let's say that you now have this project in mind and you kind of know what level you're pitching it at and to whom. Now we have to start thinking about, well, how do you actually get the work done? Most projects are not single-handed because they almost always require us leveraging something around us to make things happen. And the buckets that I've seen are around design. So what are we actually going to do? In Cassidy's place, you know, who do we have a design for the room? You know, have we taken the measurements? Do we know how much space we have to work with? Do we know, in your case, Shom, if the project that you want to do is mostly built, hardly built, you know, somewhere in between? So if we're building it from a pure idea that has no infrastructure at all, that's really different versus you want to piggyback onto an extant program and add a few classes to something that's already up and running and a well-oiled machine. For you, Tiffany, same. Like if you want to do a journal club, you sort of know what you have to do, right? You've got to get a moderator, you got a space, you got to get a time, you got to tell everybody about it, you got to get people to show up. If it's in the morning, you need some coffee, maybe donuts and some fruit, you know, some incentives to get people there, and then the work can start. So that's what I mean by sort of this design phase. Once you sort of figure out what you're going to do, you have to get down to the nitty-gritty of how you're going to do it. And I think that is thinking about, you know, the first tick box is this an activity that will require IRB review? Yes or no? And when in doubt, the answer is go fill out an IRB form to find out, or better still, come to me first and let me talk it through with you to sort of figure out what kind of a project is this? Is this really human subjects? Is this really research? Those are the two big questions. And I will tell you that there's a lot of gray zone because a lot of what we do in QI looks a lot like research. But the number one differentiator is who bears the risk and who gains the reward. So a QI project is we want to have 2 different diagnostic tests that we're going to run on the next 10 patients to see how it goes. And after this little project, whichever one is the right way to go, then all future patients will benefit from that. So they may have been part of the participant group, but they're also part of the beneficiary of the information. That's typically QI. So anytime you're reinvesting that data right back into your own process improvement, and the people who were the research participants or the QI project participants are also the future beneficiaries of the new knowledge, then those who receive that direct benefit are the same people who went through the process is QI. Otherwise, for research, it's like, you know, we're going to do drug development in phase 1 trials of people who are going to die, whether we do the phase 1 trial, yes or no. They're not going to benefit from the research, but future generations of patients would, but they never will. And that's new knowledge, and it might go sideways or it might go backwards. So we can't guarantee we're even going to learn anything that could benefit the people who go through the study with us. So that's, in my view, the biggest difference between research and quality improvement. Other logistics are, will this require any money? And if so, where's that going to come from? Is that going to be a departmental fund? Is that your little startup fund? Do you have some other monies? Do you need to write a grant for that? And then once you do you have the bandwidth and the talent to actually manage the project, or do you need to get some help to get that done? So If it's a teeny project and it's just you, probably not a lot to it. But if it's a University of Washington School of Medicine wide project, you're probably going to need some allies to help get you through that whole process. For you, Cassidy, and your project, it could be you need a contractor, right? You maybe you can DIY some of it, but maybe there's parts of it where you actually have to go out and recruit some very specific talent because the job is not yours and you're just going to mess it up if you do it yourself. So you need to figure out, when can you do it yourself and when do you need to bring in other people? And if you can figure that out in the design stage, it's going to help because it will affect both the cost of the project and the timeline of the project. So the way projects work around my house, my husband is very talented. Things never get finished. They're beautiful, but they take 17 times longer than if I just hired somebody. So these are different trade-offs that you're going to make when you're making these decisions. Data is a big question. How are you going to collect it? Are you going to write your own surveys? Is there any kind of data that's already in circulation that you might be able to get your hands on to answer those questions? If people want to do some work using data out of the new Epic, which is supposed to have a whole lot of really great reporting functions and data query processes, maybe you can do that yourself. Maybe you need some help. What kind of analysis are you going to do will flow from what kind of question it is, what kind of outcome you're interested in, or what kind of process you're trying to measure, and how complicated it is. A question that comes up a lot in surveys is, I want to compare first year, second year, third year residents. Okay. Are you designing it to make sure that you get your survey in front of first, second, and third year residents? Is there a barrier to first, second, and third residents completing that? Do third residents feel fine answering questions, but first year residents don't? If you're going to say something about, I'm interested in group differences by year of residency, but you don't ask about what year of residency they're in, you can't answer that question. So some things might seem obvious, but this is when it's a really good idea to get somebody who's going to be able to think about the analysis and what to do with those data before you collect them, because we can't go backwards. And so someone like me can certainly help you, play out the scenarios and just make sure that you've covered all the bases and you know where you're going, so that the project that you have is doable and will actually answer the sets of questions that you seek to answer. And then lastly, we're thinking about dissemination. And at the end of the day, what can you do to make sure this comes back and counts for you as scholarship? So where would you present it? For example, we've learned that if you want to do MedEd Portal for a new curriculum, you can't just send them your good idea. You have to actually run that curriculum with real students and probably get at least 20, 30, 40 students at a minimum, and ideally run it more than once. So it's not just the first time you did it, but you've done it a couple of times. For some people that are teaching something every month, you could get enough data to write something on MedEd Portal in a couple of months. But for some people that are doing a rotation once a year, it might take you 5 years until you have enough information to actually publish this on MedEd Portal. So these are some of the considerations, and it's why it's good to reach out early so that we can talk them through, because essentially everything's a trade-off of one kind or another, and knowing what those trade-offs are is how you advance your cause. When I think about resources, these are the ones that usually come to mind. The first one's time. That's the coin of the realm in academic medicine, because nobody has enough of it. Even those of you who have some funding for your time, even if you're, say, 10% for teaching responsibilities, it usually takes you a week to catch up on your outstanding work with that 10%, and then that time is up, and then you don't have enough time to do it again. So time is always a deal. Money is if you have to buy things from the outside, and that could be equipment, supplies, or other people's time. Brain power is what I mean by the third one there, and just thinking about other team members who know things that you don't. And then the last one is data, and where are you going to get it? So these are the kinds of things to always keep in mind, because every project involves all of these things to more or less degree. And these are things that should align with the scope of the project. So the other thing I'll get sometimes when I'm working with new folks is they'll come into me and they'll tell me what they want to do. And I'm like, yeah, that's a 5-year, $3 million R01 project from the NIH. Are you wanting to write a grant? And they're like, no, I wanted to get it done in 3 months by myself. And I'm like, okay, well, the scope is way out of whack. We've got to change what's realistic given the resources that you have, because it's probably not going to get you what you need. And that's okay, but we just need to shift it so that the resources and the questions also match each other. There's that adorable baby. Hello, baby. So these are a couple of sources for resources. Most of these are the Center for Leadership and Innovation, CLIMB is in, and PSIP, Patient Safety Innovations Program. Those are both UW programs. The Western Group on Educational Affairs is outside of this, but has a small grants program. I'm a resource to you. And then there is a program through the ITHS Data Warehouse where you could be accessing data from the EHR across the board. And that's another place, if you want to use those data, you can get them. And then lastly, I just wanted to talk a little bit about project timelines, because this also fits back and forth. And I think there's essentially 2 ways that you can think about time, because again, that's your #1 resource. You either, you know what you want to do and you don't have a specific amount of time. So then it's your job to sort of scope it and figure out how long is this going to take me, versus you know how much time you have to get the job done. So then you can have to scale it so that it fits within that amount of time. So the way to do these 2 things differently is you start at the beginning if you know what you want to do, but you don't know how long it's going to take, and you just start to calendar it out. Okay, I want to start my journal club. I know I've got 6 steps that I got to get done. Given all the other stuff that I have on my plate, it's probably going to take me about 3 months to get that done. Or I want to start my journal club on July 1st. Oops, it's June 4th right now. Okay, what can I get done in 3 weeks to get this started on July 1st? Oops, maybe that's not enough time. Okay, maybe I better more realistically make my new start date August 1st. Okay, maybe August 15th. Okay, well, actually, no, maybe September, because I want all the new hires and I want to make sure everybody's in. Okay, so you see how you can talk yourself in and out of the scope by deciding which of these ways you go forward. Yeah, totally working on it, right? And then you can also go, oh, wait, actually, we could do this on July 1 if I had 3 other people who could help me with my task list. So instead of me being the only one trying to make this happen in the next 3 weeks, which would be Herculean, impossible, can't do it. But I have this great team of 3 people and we're all not on service at different times. So my 3 days not on service, I can move it forward, and then I can hand it off to somebody else who's not on service and they can move it forward, and then somebody else can. And then, the last week of June, I'll be not on service again, and I can pick it up and bring it home. So these are other ways to kind of think about how you can get stuff done, especially if it's mostly on people's own time without a lot of external resources. And then this is what's called a Gantt chart. I should know what Gantt stands for, but I don't. But I just make these up in Excel. I just make little skinny columns. And sometimes people put them down to the month. Some people will put them on a quarter. It sort of depends on, how many different tasks and how micro you need to get. There are also a lot of new computer programs that will do project tracking for you. But it kind of depends on if you need that level of reminder in place and structure. So these are just basically, you write down all the tasks and then you write down the calendar and you sort of say anything that's black is when I'm going to be working on this. And by month 3, I'm going to be done with that. And you write this as both aspiration at the beginning to give yourself a roadmap, but also in the middle, if you realize 3 months was not enough time or too much time, it's going to throw the rest of your timeline off. So all of these activities talk to each other. And this is the way that you understand for yourself what the scope is, and you can communicate it to others. So we're at time, and I thank you for the time. When you reach out to me, I will say, yes, please, let's make a date, because I am always excited to learn about the work you're doing. Your project can be big or small, it's all the same. And I'll send you a form that has these questions on it, and I'll ask you to complete them as best as you can, so that I just get a sense of what you're talking, what you're interested in and sort of where you're at. And then we'll get together and we'll take it to whatever the next step is that needs to be.